No more What Ifs, Only Goodbye by Sarah Lilly. Anastasia Fleming was the mute girl the Copeland family adopted from an orphanage, who later married her so-called brother Edward Copeland. Everyone in Houston knew Edward adored Anastasia. He defied his family, ignored the backlash, and gave her a lavish wedding. People envied her luck, envied how she'd gone from nothing to everything. He loved her so much that she was willing to shield him from the knife when he was kidnapped. In the end, her hands were ruined. She could never play the violin again. But she didn't regret it. As long as he loved her, it was worth it. One day, after a rehab session, she didn't see him waiting. She searched the halls and finally spotted him. Then she heard what he was saying to their son, Thomas Copeland, and froze. "Relax. I told the kidnappers, like you asked. Just hurt mommy's hands. It won't affect Priscilla's competition." Those words made Anastasia's mind buzz. She froze, like lightning had struck her. Priscilla Marlowe was the girl he had loved at 18 and never gotten over. She stood there, numb, while Edward kept talking. "Well, Anastasia's so good at the violin. If she had competed, Priscilla wouldn't have won. None of us wanted to see her upset." Each word drained the color from Anastasia's face. By the end, she was shaking uncontrollably. She wanted to scream, to ask him why he was doing this to her. But all the pain, all the love, only turned into tears. She had loved him with all her heart. She had struggled through the years to raise her son. And now, they were the ones who'd broken her dreams and ruined her life. Anastasia didn't know how she walked out of the hospital or how she got into the car. All she knew was that her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. The woman driving recognized her, not noticing her gloom. She spoke with envy. "Mrs. Copeland, you know, every woman in Houston envies you. Your love story with Mr. Copeland could be a fairy tale." Everyone knew Edward adored his wife. But no one knew it was him who ruined her hands. Years ago, 12-year-old Edward had taken her from the orphanage. She had clutched her washed-out dress and treated him as a brother. He told her stories to put her to sleep, played hide and seek, ripped up boys' love letters, and chased off punks who mocked her for being mute. Anastasia fell helplessly into his warmth, in love with her so-called brother. But she was only the Copeland family's foster daughter. And she knew he had someone in his heart. So she buried her feelings, never told a soul. Until that day, when Edward, drunk and red-eyed, pulled her into his arms. "Do you love me?" he asked. He tilted her chin, forcing her to look at him, coaxing softly. "Anna, I know you've always cared for me. Truth is, I feel the same." Before she could answer, Edward's smile deepened. He lowered his head and kissed her lips, tender and lingering. After that, he treated her like she was his world. Like he'd plucked the stars for her. But it all ended the day Priscilla returned. She told Anastasia that when Edward had agreed to be with her, she had just rejected him. She said all the love Edward had now was actually hers. She said all the love Anastasia had from Edward was really meant for her. At first, Anastasia laughed it off. But now, she believed it. All of it. She was nothing but Priscilla's stand-in, Edward's outlet. Her eyes blurred with tears. She wanted to cry, but no sound came. Her heart felt like it was being crushed, leaving her gasping. Just then, her doctor texted. "Miss Fleming, there's a research center abroad. They have advanced treatment for your congenital aphasia and nerve damage. Are you sure you don't want to try?" This time, Anastasia didn't hesitate. She wiped her tears and replied. "Okay, I'll go, but don't tell anyone, especially Edward." The reply came almost instantly. "Got it, I'll send you the address now." She booked a ticket for 2 weeks later. Staring out the window, tears streaming, she whispered to herself, "Edward, never again." Chapter 2. When Anastasia came back, Edward was already home. Delicate and beautiful Priscilla was sitting on the floor, not caring about her image, playing toy cars with Thomas. Laughter echoed now and then. From a distance, they looked like a happy family of 3. Anastasia felt a pain in her heart. But the next second, she froze, instinctively covering her mouth and nose. The huge living room was filled with flowers of every color. The pollen in the air almost suffocated her. She was allergic to pollen. Her face quickly flushed red from lack of air. But Edward still held her hand, not letting her go. He didn't notice anything wrong. Instead, he spoke casually. "Anna, why did you leave without saying a word? I waited for you at the hospital for so long." But she couldn't answer. Her face turned bluish-purple as she struggled for breath. She tore her hand free and stumbled toward the bedroom. The allergy medicine was inside. But after just a few steps, she bumped too hard, knocking flowers from a vase to the floor. Her swinging hand even sent a trophy on the table crashing down. The sound of shattering glass and Priscilla's scream came at the same time. Thomas blocked her path, glaring. "Mommy, why did you break Priscilla's trophy on purpose?" Anastasia shook her head desperately, tears streaming. She collapsed, too weak to stand. Edward walked over seeing the mess, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Anna, I know your injured hand kept you from competing. I know you're sad, but that doesn't mean you can smash Scylla's hard-earned trophy." He bent down, carefully picking up the broken pieces. He held them like treasure, not sparing her a glance. By now, Anastasia's lungs burned for air. Her heart pounded wildly. Her will to survive drove her to crawl toward the bedroom. Even then, Thomas wouldn't let her be. He aimed his toy gun at her and pulled the trigger in anger. Steel pellets hit her body, making her gasp from the pain. Red welts bloomed across her pale skin. Seeing her own son treat her like this, the child she had carried for 10 months, Anastasia wept bitterly, her heart breaking apart. Her trembling hand finally reached the medicine. Swallowing it, she felt a shred of clarity return. But before she could catch her breath, the scolding continued. "Scylla only had that one trophy, and you smashed it. She even said she'd take you to the celebration gala tonight. When did you become so jealous?" Thomas chimed in. "Mommy, you're a bad mommy. You can't stand anyone being happy. You're crippled but won't let others live well. I don't like you, Mommy." The accusations came one after another. Anastasia could no longer hold back. She covered her face and broke down, sobbing. Her eyes were red as she signed with trembling hands, shaken by anger and grief. "I didn't mean it. Did you all forget I'm allergic to pollen?" Seeing Edward freeze, Anastasia suddenly thought of the past. Noticing her trembling body, Edward seemed to finally remember. Guilt flashed in his eyes. "Anna, I'm sorry. I forgot. I'll have the flowers removed right now." He moved quickly. Soon, the flowers were gone. He pulled her into his arms, coaxing softly. "Honey, I didn't mean it. You know that. I've just been too busy, and it popped into my mind." Thomas pouted, reluctantly muttering. "Sorry, Mommy, I was wrong." Priscilla, who had been watching quietly, suddenly spoke. "Don't be mad. Anna, I heard you love food. Tonight's my celebration gala. I've booked the rooftop. Let's not waste time." At 8, the fireworks lit up the city center. Brilliant colors burst across the sky, then faded into drifting sparks. As the last sparks faded, Edward suddenly took out a necklace and fastened it around her neck. "Honey, tonight is Scylla's celebration, but it's also our wedding anniversary. I hope from now on, the one by my side will always be you." She had seen that necklace at an auction. It was called, "The Only Love." It meant one love for a lifetime. But Edward, how could he deserve that? She gave a mocking smile, meeting his gaze full of deep affection. In his eyes, there was only her. Priscilla teased from the side. "Why does my celebration feel like it turned into your anniversary?" Edward only patted Anastasia's head with a gentle smile. "As long as Anna likes it, that's all that matters." More fireworks bloomed. Edward asked her to close her eyes and make a wish. She did, but as the fireworks burst, she opened her eyes and saw Edward and Priscilla, locked in a passionate kiss. On their wedding anniversary, the man she loved was kissing another woman. Anastasia's lashes trembled. She pressed her hands together. Despair hit her like a tidal wave, dragging her under. She couldn't do it. She couldn't pretend not to see the man she had loved since childhood. Even though she had prepared herself to let him go, watching them kiss right in front of her still left her gasping with pain. It takes years to fall in love, but only a moment to let go. And in that moment, Anastasia decided she would stop loving Edward. Chapter 3. For the next few days, Anastasia didn't go anywhere. Edward stayed with her at home, keeping her company. Just like before, taking her shopping, waiting while she did her nails, and even patiently watching her try on dress after dress. The shop assistants looked at the handsome man in front of them and sighed. "Mr. Copeland is amazing. What man would do this much for his wife? I'm so jealous of Anastasia." Anastasia heard every word. In the past, hearing that would make her blush and hide in Edward's arms. Now, she only gave a polite smile. Edward frowned at her cold, distant expression. He pulled her into his arms, tapped her nose gently, and asked with concern, "What's wrong, honey? You've been gloomy lately. Is something bothering you?" She looked up at him, forcing a smile as she signed, "I'm fine. It's just my period. That's why I'm upset." His frown deepened. To cheer her up, boxes of the newest designer dresses were delivered to the Copelands residence. He bought piles of jewelry too. But Anastasia still didn't smile. Then came the notice from the kindergarten. A parent meeting. Parents would also join in a parent-child game. Every year, Anastasia had gone. This time was no different. But when she reached the school gate, she saw Thomas run straight into Priscilla's arms, his face lit with a smile she had never seen before. Her heart sank. She took a few steps forward. Thomas spotted her. His smile vanished, replaced with the usual snarl. "Go away. I don't want you here. I don't want a mute mommy at the parent meeting. I want pretty, gentle Priscilla." She had heard people call her mute countless times. But hearing it from Thomas's own mouth still cut deep. He had always despised her for not speaking, for making him lose face in front of others. Yet Anastasia never loved him less. She even blamed herself, spoiling him in every way she could. Priscilla saw it all, a glint of pride flashing in her eyes. "Sorry, Anna, Thomas is so clingy. He insisted on calling me yesterday. I really couldn't say no." Anastasia's face was blank. She ignored her and stood off to the side, waiting for it all to end. When the crowd had mostly dispersed, she finally walked over. She glanced around but didn't see Thomas anywhere. Instead, Priscilla came up, her face dark as she stared at her. "Didn't you say you don't believe Eddie loves me? Let me show you whether he believes you or me." In the next second, she grabbed a handful of wooden sticks used for crafts and stabbed her own palm fast and hard. Blood dripped onto Anastasia's skirt. Priscilla cried out, "Anna, how could you? Just because you hurt your hand and can't play violin anymore, you want to make me the same as you?" Edward and Thomas appeared at the same time. The moment Thomas saw his beloved Priscilla hurt, he flew into a rage. He grabbed wooden sticks and threw them at Anastasia. Bad mommy, you hurt Priscilla? You're a bad mommy." Edward's face darkened too. He frowned, as if he couldn't believe gentle Anastasia would ever do such a thing. Anastasia clutched her skirt, shaking her head wildly. She frantically signed, her hands trembling. "It wasn't me. There's a camera. Check the footage." Edward followed her gaze. Sure enough, a surveillance camera hung above them. He was about to check it when Priscilla suddenly collapsed into his arms. Tears streamed down her pale face, her body trembling as if deeply wronged. "Why check? You think I'd stab my own hand with a stick? I'm not that stupid," Thomas echoed quickly. "Yeah, Priscilla would never do that to herself. It was mommy, for sure." Just a few words and Edward was completely convinced by Priscilla. Back home, he had her wounds simply dressed. Then he ordered Anastasia to apologize. Anastasia numbly signed, "It really wasn't me. I didn't do it. I won't apologize." Priscilla sobbed at the side. "If Anna won't admit fault, then just forget it." The sight of her tears made Edward's face turn grim. His tone left no room for refusal. "Anna, you're being disobedient. You know what I hate most is being lied to." He ordered the servants to drive 10 wooden sticks under her nails. The agony cut straight through her, leaving her drenched in sweat. She wanted to cry, to scream, but only hoarse, muffled sounds came from her throat. In the end, she was locked in a sealed room. No air, no light. And she had claustrophobia. The floor was cold. She curled into a corner, hugging her knees, tears flowing non-stop. Just before she blacked out, she thought she saw that boy again. He had once said he'd never leave her alone. He had said he would always stand by her side, unconditionally. He had said he'd never let anyone hurt her. Yet now, the one who hurt her most was him. Chapter 4. Anastasia wasn't locked up for long. She was released the next day. Edward immediately treated her injured nails, then said coldly, "This can't happen again." But when he saw her blank face, he finally gave in. His voice softened. "Honey, don't be sad. You love snow views the most, right? I'll take you halfway up the mountain to see the whole city covered in snow, okay?" Anastasia didn't answer. After a long silence, she stiffly signed, "Edward, if one day I'm gone, would you be sad?" He pulled her into a tight embrace, as if he wanted to crush her into his chest. His voice carried raw panic. "Honey, what's wrong? Don't scare me. Are you mad at me? Don't leave me. I can't live without you. If you're gone, my life will be meaningless." The fear on his face wasn't fake. Even his arms trembled as he held her. His reaction surprised her. She wondered, if he truly lost me, what would he do? After calming Anastasia down, the three of them set off for the snowy mountain. Of course, Priscilla came too. It was a deep winter. Snow lay thick on the ground. From halfway up the mountain, the whole city looked like a world of ice and snow. Afraid she'd feel cold, Edward had brought hand warmers and even draped his coat over her shoulders. Worried she'd be bored, he sliced her favorite fruit himself and placed it within easy reach. But she barely touched her fruit, only sipping hot chocolate distractedly while listening to their chatter. Suddenly, their normal conversation shifted into Russian. A man bumped Edward's shoulder and teased, "Eddie, you're so blatant with Priscilla. What if your wife finds out?" Edward's expression didn't change. He even took Priscilla's hand, replying in Russian, "So what if she does? Who in our circle doesn't keep a wife at home and a mistress outside?" His words drew even louder laughter. "Back in high school, you already had a crush on Priscilla. After all these years, you still do. What is it about her that you can't let go of, Eddie?" Edward's lips curved, expression unchanged. "First love always shines the brightest. No one can compare." The group burst into louder laughter. One bold man let his eyes fall on Anastasia. "Looks like your little Anna is crazy about you. Since you've got Priscilla already, why not let me have a turn once you're tired of her?" Edward's face instantly darkened. He ground out each word, "Anna is mine. Even if I get tired of her, she'll stay by my side. Don't even dream about it." The men kept talking, their voices rowdy, none of them noticing her pale face. They didn't know she caught every word. In college, she'd chosen Russian just to communicate with him better, just to share more common ground. But now, the very language she learned for him was being used to trample her heart. Her hands trembled as she rose, ready to leave, when shouts came from outside. "Avalanche! Run!" A mass of snow thundered down the mountain. Chaos erupted as people scrambled for their lives. Edward quickly steadied himself, grabbed Anastasia, and pulled her to run. But panic made her twist her ankle. She couldn't move. Just then, Thomas clutched Priscilla's hand, screaming in terror, "Daddy! Daddy, come save us!" Edward looked at Anastasia clutching her ankle, then at them. Without the slightest hesitation, he chose them. He didn't even glance back, only threw her a single line as he ran. "Anna, wait here, I'll be right back for you." Watching him run off without her, Anastasia let out a bitter laugh through her tears. At 18, Edward would have saved her without hesitation. At 28, he didn't even look her way. As the avalanche buried her, she thought she saw him turning back for her. When she opened her eyes again, she was in the hospital. Chapter 5. Her baby was gone. Anastasia lay on the hospital bed, her hand resting on her flat stomach, face blank. For the first time, she realized when pain reached a certain point, it truly numbed you. Edward sat by her side, offering half-hearted comfort. "Anna, don't be sad. If we lose this one, we can always have another baby later." He looked at her, as if wanting to say more, when the doors suddenly swung open. A nurse rushed in, her voice urgent. "Family of patient in room 24. The patient is hemorrhaging badly, she needs an immediate blood transfusion. The hospital blood bank is short. Any family members with type B blood?" Edward's gaze fell on her. "Anna, Scylla was hurt protecting Tom during the escape. She ruptured a major artery. As Tom's mother, you should set an example. Step up and donate your blood." Anastasia was stunned. He wanted a woman who had just miscarried to donate blood to his first love. She could hardly believe her ears. Her fingers stiffly formed the words in sign language. "Do you even know what you're saying?" The nurse added gently, "Mrs. Copeland just miscarried. She's in no condition to give blood. Is anyone else type B? Time is critical. The patient can't wait. Anna, listen to me. You have to donate. You're the only one who can save her." Edward's voice left no room for refusal. He ordered coldly, "Take her into the operating room. Draw her blood." From the next bed, Thomas had just woken up hearing that his beloved Priscilla was in critical condition. He spoke to her for once in a soft tone. "Mommy, please save Priscilla. If she hadn't shielded me, I'd be the one badly hurt. It's just blood. You won't die." His words froze her heart completely. Her husband, her son, the two people who once meant everything to her. And not one of them cared about her life. She struggled to get up, to escape, but Edward's bodyguards caught her easily and forced her onto the operating table. The needle pierced her skin. Blood streamed into the bag. In minutes, they had drawn 500 cc. Anastasia's body shook uncontrollably as her vision blurred. Her body temperature was plummeting. A nurse, unable to bear it, murmured, "Mr. Copeland, your wife's body can't handle any more blood loss. Maybe we should." But he cut her off coldly. "Keep drawing. Anna has always been healthy. However much Scylla needs, take it from her." Bag after bag was rushed into Priscilla's operating room. Anastasia finally collapsed, blacking out completely. A miscarriage followed by massive blood loss. She remained unconscious for 3 days and nights. Edward never came, and she no longer asked for him. Once her body fully recovered, Anastasia returned to Copeland's residence to gather the documents she needed for going abroad. She pulled out everything that carried their shared memories. A whole box of love letters. Birthday gifts that came year after year. Handmade crafts. Countless pieces of expensive jewelry. All of it proof of Edward's love for her. But she listed them on Facebook Marketplace. And the things that wouldn't sell, she piled up in the back garden and set on fire. The flames devoured every last trace of memory. Her heart would never again belong to him. She stared blankly at the final envelope burning to ash, not noticing the shadow closing in behind her. When she finally looked up, her eyes met Edward's flustered gaze. He strode forward, pulled her into his arms, his voice trembling in a way that even surprised himself. "Honey, what are you doing? What are you burning?" While she lay unconscious, he had spent nearly every moment at Priscilla's side. He'd even prepared excuses for her questions, yet Anastasia never asked. Her strange calm unsettled him more and more. His arms tightened around her in fear. He couldn't even say clearly what he felt for her. Divorce her? He couldn't let go. Be faithful? He still thought Priscilla was good. So he told himself keeping things this way was fine. Anastasia studied him for a long moment before forcing a small smile, her hands signing. "I'm fine. Just burning some old clothes that were taking up space." But her words didn't ease his doubts. He was about to press further when she turned and walked away. Over the next few days, she threw herself into tying up work, secretly transferred her assets, and collected the visa she'd arranged early. When everything was ready, only 3 days remained before she went overseas. Chapter 6. 3 days before leaving the country, Anastasia went to the nursing home to see her biological mother, Laura Kane. She wanted to say goodbye properly, extend her VIP ward for another 50 years, and leave enough money for her to live out her days in peace. Back when the Copeland family adopted her, they had used their influence to track down her real parents. Her father had passed away 5 years ago. Her mother was left paralyzed after a car accident, and the Copeland family had placed her in the best nursing home they could find. When Anastasia arrived with her things, she found Priscilla already there. The moment Priscilla saw her, she smiled and walked over. "Is this your mother? What a coincidence. I just came with a troupe for a volunteer performance." Anastasia ignored her, fixing Laura's blanket without even a glance. Seeing herself brushed off again and again, Priscilla's polite smile slipped away, replaced by a vicious glare. "You still think you're some violin prodigy, huh? Your hand is ruined, don't you know? It was Eddie who had someone injure you. You really have no shame. You knew I was with him, yet you still forced yourself between us. Anastasia, you're pathetic." Anastasia looked at her coldly but said nothing. Her calm, indifferent silence where Priscilla had expected a breakdown only infuriated her further. "Born in the countryside, and it shows even your mother looks hideous. Born in the countryside, and it shows even your mother looks hideous." With that she shoved Anastasia hard to the floor, snatched the hot kettle from the table, flipped it open and poured the scalding water over one aura. The sight made Anastasia snap. She scrambled up from the floor, only to be kicked down again. Towering over her, Priscilla sneered. "As long as you stay in the Copeland family, I'll make sure you suffer every day." On the bed, Laura stared in terror. She wanted to call for help but couldn't speak, only widen her eyes, pleading silently. Priscilla clapped her hands together, still smiling, though her eyes were wild with madness. The next moment, she reached out, yanked off Laura's ventilator, and let out a cold laugh. Seeing this, Anastasia finally snapped. She struggled up, desperate to run out and call a nurse. But Priscilla spread her arms and blocked the doorway, staring her down with open provocation. Minutes passed. The alarms on the medical equipment began to blare. Laura, starved of oxygen, turned blue. Anastasia was frantic, but Priscilla pinned her to the floor with a hard stomp, leaving her unable to move. She opened her mouth, wanting to scream for help, but no sound came out no matter how hard she tried. Tears spilled down in frustration. Priscilla sneered at the sight. "If I hadn't turned Eddie down back then, the title of Mrs. Copeland would never have fallen to you. Do yourself a favor, divorce him now." Anastasia couldn't even hear her. She nodded at everything, just begging with her eaves for her to move. But Priscilla stood firm, clenching her teeth. Anastasia grabbed the fruit knife from the table and swung it in front of her. The very next second, Edward walked in. They glanced at Anastasia waving the knife, then at Priscilla's tear-streaked, terrified face and instantly thought he understood. His eyes filled with disappointment. "Anna, I can't believe you've become so unreasonable. Scylla only came here out of kindness to Mother, and now you're threatening her with a knife." Thomas Tan over too, slutching her leg, hitting her, and stopping her from hurting Priscilla. Anastasia dropped the knife. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him, silently pleading. She signed frantically in front of him. Following her gaze, Edward finally noticed Laura on the bed, barely clinging to life. He frowned and was about to call for a nurse when Priscilla grabbed his sleeve. She bit her lip, eyes welling like a startled kitten. Eddie, we can't let her keep this up. We have to teach her a lesson. Edward gave a grave nod, pushing aside the thought of calling for help. He turned to Anastasia. Anna, do you admit you were wrong? Rage shook through her body, blood rushing to her head. She tried to bolt for the door to find a nurse, but Edward's bodyguards caught her. Apologize to Scylla, or you're not leaving. His voice was ice. Apologize to Scylla, otherwise, no one saves your mother. Tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. She swallowed every ounce of pride and hatred and bowed. Once, twice, 3 times. She bowed 10 times in total before Edward finally nodded in satisfaction. At that moment, the monitor gave a sharp, continuous alarm. Anastasia whipped her head around and froze. A flat line. 10 minutes of resuscitation later, they declared her dead. As the white sheet covered Laura, Anastasia's knees gave out. She crumpled to the floor, burying her face in her hands as harsh sobs tore from her throat. If only help had come minutes Cather. If only she had never that Edward. But there are no limits. Chapter 7. It poured the day Laura was buried. Out of guilt, Edward suggested a grand funeral. Anastasia refused. In the end, she was the only one there. She carried Laura's urn, eyes empty, walking like a ghost through the cemetery. The staff shivered just watching her grief. Still, they understood her grief and didn't disturb her. She placed the urn on the grave she bought, leaned against the memorial photo, and closed her eyes. Soon, footsteps came closer. A shadow fell over her. She looked up straight into Priscilla's mocking eyes. Priscilla tilted her chin upward with smug satisfaction. Now you see who really matters to Eddie. This is what you brought on yourself. Facing Laura's killer, taunted again and again, Anastasia's rage burst. She stood and slapped her with all her strength. Priscilla froze, holding her cheek. Then she shrieked, "You hit me? Anastasia, how dare you hit me?" Spoiled all her life, she had never been humiliated like this. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Then she spotted the urn behind Anastasia. She lunged, grabbed it, and smashed it to the ground. The urn shattered, ashes mixed with rain, vanishing into the air. What remained, she ground into mud with her foot. "Ob!" The cry tore from Anastasia's chest, soaked in despair. Sobbing, she knelt, trying to gather what little ashes were left. She had spent so much to buy Laura a grave. After settling the burial, a day had passed. Tomorrow, she will leave. She had her new identity papers and her passport and had already contacted the lawyer handling her divorce. While she was packing, Edward wrapped his arms around her waist, his voice panicked. "Honey, where are you going with your things?" Her coldness these past days made his heart more restless than ever. Was she leaving him? Did she know about him and Priscilla? Did she? He didn't dare think further. Every possibility was unbearable. One thing was clear: he could never accept Anastasia leaving him. Anastasia looked at his face and forced a smile. She freed one hand, signing, "I'm not going anywhere. I just might have to travel for work, so I'm packing." Having grown up with her, Edward knew she wasn't telling the truth. But he said nothing. He had already decided he would make it up to her, treat her well, and never let Priscilla's presence hurt her again. He had neglected her lately. From now on, he would make it up to her. "Anna, tomorrow's your birthday. I've prepared a special gift for you. You'll love it." Anastasia froze, then smiled as she signed, "Really? I got you something too." Hearing that, Edward's smile deepened. His earlier thoughts now felt ridiculous. Anastasia had loved him since childhood. How could she ever leave him? That thought finally gave him peace, and he vowed to spend the rest of his life with her. But that night, Edward never came home. Meanwhile, Priscilla posted a photo on her Instagram: a tall figure, a smaller one, and a child holding their hands. This time, Anastasia's heart no longer ached. She simply tapped, like. At dawn, light broke over the horizon. The house was empty. No one noticed Anastasia had gone. She walked straight through the airport, dragging her suitcase, back straight, never once looking back. From that moment on, Anastasia no longer existed. And in her world, Edward would never appear again. She was free. Chapter 8. The plane slowly took off. Anastasia gazed out the window at the clouds that seemed almost within reach, her mind drifting away. Her life before the age of 28 had been filled with sweet memories of Edward. But now, from this moment on, Edward would never be a part of her life again. Since neither he nor Thomas loved her. Then she didn't need their love, either. From now on, she would only love herself. Meanwhile, at the largest amusement park in Haiti, a family of 3 had tried every ride in the park. But no matter what, Edward just couldn't feel happy. He was constantly plagued by a sense of unease, as if something was slipping further and further away from him. Last night, Priscilla suddenly came down with a high fever. When Thomas found out, he insisted that Edward come along to help take care of her. After her fever finally subsided the next day, Thomas pestered them even more to go to the amusement park. Unable to resist his child's repeated requests, Edward finally gave in. But it wasn't until they were having the most fun that he suddenly realized. Today was Anastasia's birthday. He was just about to take out his phone to call her and explain, when Priscilla called out to him, "Eddie, Tom is fussing about wanting ice cream. Can you go buy some? I'll wait here with him, okay?" Thomas chimed in from the side, "Daddy, go buy ice cream. I want some." Edward had no choice but to put down his phone for now. He gently patted Thomas's head and doted on him, saying, "All right, Daddy will go get it for you." There were a lot of people in line. He waited for a full half hour before it was finally his turn. Looking at the dazzling array of ice cream flavors, Edward blurted out instinctively, "One strawberry, please." It was only after he spoke that he realized strawberry was Anastasia's favorite flavor. When they were young, she would always pester him to buy her ice cream, and would even mischievously smear it on the corner of his mouth. When did that bright, lively, and always passionate girl become so silent and withdrawn? Edward was momentarily lost in thought, not even noticing when the ice cream was ready. "Sir, your ice cream." A girl who recognized Edward pointed at him and whispered to her friend, "Isn't it said that Mr. Copeland loves his wife more than anything? Why does the woman next to him today not look like his wife?" "Don't talk nonsense. Everyone in Haiti knows Mrs. Copeland is the apple of his eye. You must be mistaken." Hearing the gossip behind him, Edward's face turned pale, and even his departing figure seemed to be fleeing in embarrassment. After handing the ice cream to Thomas, he suggested they go home. "Tom, it's getting late. Let's go home. Today is Mommy's birthday, so let's go home and celebrate with her." But Thomas clung to Priscilla's leg and refused to let go. "No, I don't want to go home. She's not Mommy. I don't want a mute to be my mom." The kids at kindergarten all made fun of his mom for being mute. He didn't like her at all, and certainly didn't want her to be his mother. But unexpectedly, after he said this, his usually gentle father scolded him for the first time. Edward's face was cold as he reprimanded his son, "Tom, no matter what, she is your mother from now on. You are not allowed to call her mute in front of her." Seeing him still defending Anastasia, a trace of jealousy flashed in Priscilla's eyes. Clearly, she was Edward's only true love. She had just been young and naive, arriving a few years too late. Why did he still seem unable to let go of her? Shouldn't she be the one he loved most? Was she destined to be a canary kept out of sight for her whole life, a parasitic vine clinging to him? Priscilla bit her lip, unwilling to accept this fate. But for the sake of the child, she still didn't say anything. Edward noticed the unwillingness on her face and gently reassured her, "Scylla, don't worry. I will give you a proper place in my life." He would spoil her like the most beloved little princess, and she would always be the pure, white lotus girl in his heart. If she wished, he would also give her enough money, at least $20,000, to support her for the rest of her life and set her free. But the position of Mrs. Copeland would always and only belong to Anastasia. Chapter 9. After sending Priscilla home, Edward hurried back to his own house as soon as possible. But when he saw the empty villa, he was momentarily stunned. The childish plush pillows that used to sit on the sofa had vanished, the pair of couple slippers he once scoffed at were nowhere to be found, and even the wedding photo that hung in the living room had been taken down. Standing in the middle of the empty living room, an unprecedented panic swept over him completely. Thinking of something, he rushed upstairs and pushed open the bedroom door. He found, even more despairingly, that the violin she once treasured was also gone. With trembling hands, he sent her a message. But all he received in response were rows of red exclamation marks. Not only that, even his texts and calls had all been blocked. He roared furiously at the servants, "Where did Anastasia go? Why is everything gone?" But the servants, confused, reported honestly, "Mr. Copeland, ever since you left last night, Mrs. Copeland instructed us to throw away all these things, and none of us have seen Mrs. Copeland today." Edward spoke through gritted teeth, his voice trembling unconsciously. "Has Anastasia been acting strange lately?" The servants all shook their heads, indicating that nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Edward's face was as dark as thick ink, and the oppressive atmosphere around him made the servants afraid to even breathe too loudly. Suddenly, one servant timidly raised her hand. She knelt before Edward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Copeland, Mrs. Copeland gave us some unwanted trinkets a while ago." Then, the other servants also raised their hands one after another, all confirming that Anastasia had indeed given them things. Edward's brows twitched violently. Suddenly, he didn't dare listen any further, as if what they were about to say next would be something he absolutely couldn't bear. "Mrs. Copeland gave me this diamond ring, saying Mr. Copeland had already bought her a bigger one. This was their wedding ring. Mrs. Copeland also gave me this scarf, saying it was just taking up space. This was the scarf he had once knitted for her himself. The things he once gave her, the things she once cherished, had now all been casually given away to others." He clenched his fists, unable to believe what he was seeing, his mind completely blank. At that moment, Thomas somehow found a gift box. "Daddy, this is a present from Mommy for you." His voice helped Edward regain a shred of sanity. Edward took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Even so, his hands still trembled as he slowly tore open the gift wrapping. But when he saw the bold words divorce agreement, the psychological defenses he had built up completely collapsed, and a flood of despair and helplessness overwhelmed him. How could this be? How could it end up like this? He stared fixedly at those words, his chest feeling as if it were blocked by a giant stone, making it impossible to breathe. It was only then that he noticed a USB drive placed at the bottom. He opened it on the computer, finding 3 video recordings and 1 audio file. The first video was at the kindergarten, showing Priscilla stabbing her own palm with a wooden stick. The second video was at the nursing home, where Priscilla poured scalding hot water on Laura and even personally unplugged her ventilator. The third video was at the cemetery, where Priscilla scattered Laura's ashes with her own hands. Edward's eyes were bloodshot as he played the audio recording again. "Don't worry, Daddy followed your instructions and told the kidnappers early this morning to only hurt Mommy's hand. It won't affect Priscilla's competition. She knew everything." Edward's eyes were filled with blood, his face written all over with helplessness and despair. Little Thomas, who understood much more than before, tugged at his sleeve and softly asked, "Daddy, where's Mommy? Is she never coming back?" For some reason, although he had always wished for her to leave, now that the day had truly come, he didn't feel good at all. He even thought, "No, Daddy will bring Mommy back. I will definitely find her." Edward made a promise to him. Then he crumpled the divorce agreement into a ball, tore it to pieces, and let the countless scraps of paper flutter through the air. She was only missing, not dead. As long as she was still alive, no matter where she ran, even to the ends of the earth, he would find her. But before that, there was still one more thing he needed to do. Edward looked down at Priscilla's smug face on the screen and let out a cold laugh. Chapter 10. Compared to the bloody turmoil here, on the other side of the ocean, everything seemed calm and peaceful. After landing in Switzerland, Anastasia found herself unable to communicate due to the language barrier. Although she could understand the German they spoke, they couldn't comprehend the sign language she used. As a result, after leaving the airport, she couldn't find her luggage. The staff couldn't understand her gestures, and the passengers behind her kept urging her to hurry up. Anastasia was extremely anxious. Her suitcase contained important documents, and if it was lost, not only would she have to reapply for them, but it would also definitely delay her treatment. She didn't know what to do, and a thin layer of cold sweat formed on her forehead from anxiety. It was at this moment that a man suddenly stepped in front of her, speaking fluent German, seemingly communicating with the staff about something. A few minutes later, the man turned his head and nodded slightly at her, saying, "Tell the staff your flight number. They will take you to find your luggage soon." The man's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion, and his black overcoat made his sharply defined face appear even more stern. Anastasia was momentarily stunned, but quickly reacted and signed her thanks. The man nodded, still without a trace of a smile on his face. After picking up his own suitcase from the side, he left quickly. Following the staff's guidance, Anastasia soon found her own suitcase. She found the address of the research institute and simply hailed a cab to get there. Unfortunately, she had arrived too late, and the institute's doors were already tightly closed. The long journey had left Anastasia physically and mentally exhausted. She randomly picked a hotel to stay in for the night, planning to rent an apartment nearby later, which would be more convenient for her upcoming treatment. In the evening, after taking a shower, she lay on the bed and casually scrolled through her phone. Suddenly, a news alert popped up. Edward offers a large reward to find his wife. She frowned, didn't even bother to look at it, and quickly deleted the news. Since she had already decided to leave for good, she would no longer care about anything from her past. The next morning, she got up early, planning to look around the area to see if there were any good apartments available. Before going abroad, she had sold the things Edward had given her, and together with her previous part-time jobs, she had managed to save up a considerable amount of money. After finding a place she liked, she immediately contacted the landlord and bought a spacious apartment outright. The place was filled with sunlight, with a yard right in front of the door, and even a small, abandoned fountain on the lawn. This made Anastasia very satisfied. After putting her luggage in the apartment, she finally headed to the research institute. On the way there, she looked at the 2 scars on her arm, feeling especially uneasy. She wasn't too concerned about her congenital muteness being incurable, since she had already gotten used to it. But if there was no hope for her hand to heal, she couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. Chapter 11. Upon arriving at the institute, Anastasia was somewhat surprised. Rather than calling it an institute, it would be more accurate to describe it as the most advanced, high-tech hospital of the modern era. Guide robots could be seen everywhere, a 3D medical imaging educational model was displayed in the lobby, and a floating reception desk immediately caught the eye. Everything left Anastasia utterly astonished, but even more so, she felt constrained. The medical staff looked at the American girl before them and greeted her with a smile. "Do you have an appointment?" Anastasia nodded first, then instinctively gestured in sign language. "Yes, I have an appointment at 2 p.m. The staff member quickly typed something on the keyboard according to the information she provided, and soon handed her a printed document. Holding the document, the staff member led Anastasia to undergo a full body checkup. At first, she felt a bit uncomfortable, but everyone she met along the way seemed to show her inexplicable kindness, even smiling when their eyes met. All of this helped her relax a little. The results came out quickly. Holding her full body examination report, she followed the medical staff to find her attending physician. "This is your attending physician. Just hand him your examination report, and he will tell you what to do next." Anastasia nodded slightly and looked up at the sign on the right side of the door, which displayed the doctor's profile. There was no real photo of the doctor, only his name was printed. "Lucian Weldon." She withdrew her gaze and politely knocked on the door. After receiving a response from inside, she entered. But when she saw the man's face clearly, she was a bit surprised. His features were sharp and cold, with deep blue eyes as profound as the sea, exuding a chill that kept others at a distance. He was the very man who had helped her find her luggage at the airport. But she quickly averted her gaze and handed him her examination report. Lucian's eyes also fell on her, but only paused for 2 seconds before he looked away. He looked at several examination reports, his brows furrowing even more tightly, as if he had encountered a particularly tricky problem. Seeing him frown, Anastasia couldn't help but feel nervous. "Don't worry, the injury to your hand can be healed. As for your congenital aphasia, our institute also has relatively mature treatment plans, but the treatment period will be a bit longer." Lucian's voice was cold, and his gaze toward her remained indifferent. However, his words completely put Anastasia at ease. She smiled, her eyes even brimming with tears. Everything was moving in a better direction. He noticed the tears at the corner of her eyes and was slightly taken aback. But he continued, "For the next few days, come here at this time every day. I'll start with some preliminary treatment for your hand, and after a few days, we'll proceed with the surgery." Anastasia sniffled and nodded vigorously. Just as she was about to leave, a voice suddenly came from behind her. "Did you ever find your suitcase in the end?" Anastasia was momentarily stunned, but quickly replied in sign language, "I found it. Thank you, I never imagined you would be my attending physician." Lucian raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Before leaving, Anastasia sensibly closed the door. After learning that she could recover, she excitedly went shopping at a large nearby supermarket, buying so many things that her once spacious apartment was soon filled. She also planted many kinds of flowers at the entrance, hoping that soon it would be blooming with colorful blossoms. Anastasia collapsed onto the sofa, and for the first time in a long while in Switzerland, she felt the warmth of home. Chapter 12. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the Copeland family had dropped to freezing point. The servants glanced at Edward's gloomy face, each one silent as if frozen, not daring to speak. Ever since Anastasia disappeared, Edward had been sitting on the sofa, saying nothing, the ashtray overflowing with cigarette ashes several times over. His assistant looked at the president's current state, feeling both frustrated and helpless. Anastasia, whether in appearance, figure, or temperament, was far superior to Priscilla. She was also the little sister Edward had spoiled since childhood. The two of them knew each other inside out. Back when Edward lost his temper at Anastasia because of Priscilla, The assistant had tried to persuade him, even daring to do so several times. But every time, he was warned not to meddle, and once, in a fit of anger, Edward even sent him off to a project in Africa. It was only after the project ended and he returned that he learned Anastasia had already left. Edward sat on the sofa, his face shrouded in smoke, yet even so, his bloodshot eyes were enough to make anyone's heart tremble. Since Anastasia disappeared, he had been frantically searching for any trace of her. But in the end, his assistant informed him that her identity information had been cancelled half a month ago. It was only now that he belatedly realized Anastasia had been planning to leave him since half a month ago. This desperate news struck him like a heavy blow, pounding mercilessly on his heart. Her evasive eyes these past days, her silent face, and even the calm, lifeless look she gave him. All at this moment, I finally had an answer. Anastasia no longer wanted him. When this thought, which he had never imagined, appeared in his mind, he felt as if he was about to go insane. She was the little sister he had watched grow up, and now, she was an inseparable part of his family. At first, being with her was just a matter of convenience, but later, he had unknowingly fallen in love with her. Family affection had long since turned into love. Edward hammered his head forcefully, trying to convince himself that this was just a terrible nightmare. As long as he woke up, Anastasia would appear by his side again. But no matter how hard he hit himself, the image of Anastasia pleading for his help became even clearer. He gasped for breath, his eyes bloodshot, letting the emotions brewing in his chest surge violently. Just then, Thomas, clutching his toy car, pushed open the door to the room. He carefully pinched the corner of his shirt and asked softly, "Daddy, Mommy wouldn't leave us, right? She even prepared lots of birthday presents for me." Lots? Edward keenly caught the key word in his son's words and followed him to another small storage room in the villa. When he opened the door and saw the mountain of gifts piled up, he was completely stunned. "Daddy, I found this note in my room. Mommy told me to come here. She said she prepared birthday presents for me all the way until I turn 18. Edward took the note, and the neat handwriting was indeed Anastasia's. But this also meant one thing. Anastasia truly didn't want them anymore. She had completely given up on them, and didn't even want to see them one last time. He gripped the note tightly, his whole body radiating a bone-chilling coldness. At that moment, his phone rang. After answering, Priscilla's cheerful voice came through. "Eddie, you're going to be a father." Chapter 13. "Oh, really, I'm going to be a father?" His voice was as cold as a demon crawling out of hell, but Priscilla didn't notice anything unusual and continued, "Yes, I just got checked at the hospital. I'm already 2 weeks pregnant. But Eddie, are you really not going to give me a proper status?" "Status?" He let out a light laugh, his eyes full of mockery. "Fine, you came to me, I'll give you a status." While waiting for Priscilla to arrive, he stared intently at the door, unable to stop his thoughts. If she hadn't repeatedly angered Anastasia back then, how would she have chosen to run away from home? He had told her more than once that he could give her anything she wanted. Except for the title of Mrs. Copeland, which could only belong to Anastasia. It seemed that his affection had made her forget her own place. Thinking of this, Edward's eyes grew colder inch by inch. The moment the door was pushed open, he reached out and grabbed Priscilla by the throat. His grip tightened, and the way he looked at her was as if she were nothing but trash. Priscilla screamed, her eyes full of terror, her hands flailing helplessly in the air. The air in her chest grew thinner and thinner, and the lack of oxygen turned her face bluish-purple. She managed to gasp out broken pleas, Eddie, what's wrong? Don't treat me like this. I'm carrying your child, my child." Edward looked at her increasingly pale face, a smile always lingering at the corner of his mouth. "Other than Anna, no one has the right to bear my child." As soon as he finished speaking, his grip suddenly loosened, and Priscilla collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. When she looked up at him again, tears streamed down her face as she sobbed, "Eddie, didn't you say you'd give me a status too? Even though Anna is your wife, I've been with you for so long. You can't treat me like this." Edward looked down at her with disdain, his voice as cold as iron. "Anna is gone." Just as her eyes lit up, he suddenly kicked her hard in the stomach. "Did you think the things you did to her would stay hidden forever? Even if she's gone, even if she left me, the position of Mrs. Copeland will never be yours." As he spoke, he squatted down, his cold fingertips lifting her chin, staring at her word by word. "Everything you did to Anna, now, I will make you experience it all." She looked at the hundreds of wooden sticks before her, her body trembling uncontrollably as she desperately tried to retreat, but soon found herself cornered with nowhere to go. "No, I didn't mean to, Eddie, I just loved you too much." But Edward waved his hand, ordering the bodyguards to tie her up tightly and bind her to a chair. Despair and helplessness instantly enveloped her. It was at this moment that Thomas suddenly pushed open the door, walked up to Priscilla, and stared at her. Seeing this, Edward frowned. He didn't want his son to witness such a scene and was about to tell him to leave. But unexpectedly, Priscilla seemed to grab onto a lifeline and screamed hoarsely at him, Tom, save me. Tell Dad to let me go. Aren't you the one who likes me the most?" But Thomas's expression remained calm. He frowned and stared at Priscilla's face for a long moment before turning to Edward and saying, "Dad, can we replace the wooden sticks with scalding hot iron rods?" His voice was neither cold nor warm, but Edward heard it loud and clear. At the same time, it exploded in Priscilla's ears. Her eyes widened, a trace of despair flashing through them. She wanted to say something more, but when she met his equally indifferent gaze, she instantly fell silent. After saying this, Thomas tilted his head, returning to his innocent and naive demeanor as he walked up to Edward. He had always thought Priscilla was gentle and kind, the mother of his dreams. But after seeing the video on the USB drive, he realized she had always been venomous at heart, and her obedient behavior in front of them was all an act. She had even driven his mother away. Thinking of this, his childish face carried an expression even colder than Edward's. Priscilla was in utter despair as she looked at the hundreds of steaming hot iron rods brought in again, her heart sinking to the lowest depths. The iron rods pierced through her nails, the pain shooting straight to her heart, making her nearly suffocate. But that was still not enough. He then ordered the bodyguards to bring a bucket of scalding hot water. Steam rose from the hot water, reflecting Priscilla's terrified face. She looked at him, almost begging, even if you hate me, at least I'm still carrying your child." Not for much longer. Edward snapped his fingers, and the bodyguards quickly lifted the bucket of hot water. Under her terrified gaze, they poured it over her entire body. In the spacious room, Priscilla's desperate and helpless screams echoed. Edward and Thomas, however, remained completely indifferent. When she was sent to the hospital, 70% of her body was scalded, her 10 fingers bleeding continuously, and even beneath her, blood gushed out. Edward ordered the doctors to treat her well. He wouldn't let her die, but he wouldn't let her truly live either. He wanted to torment her until the day he found Anastasia. Chapter 14. In the past few days, apart from cooperating with her daily hospital checkups, Anastasia spent her time building good relationships with the neighbors nearby. After a while, everyone in this small town came to know this beautiful and kind-hearted American girl. Sometimes, a blonde elderly woman would even bring her homemade chocolate pies to Anastasia. What surprised her even more was that this elderly woman seemed to understand her sign language, and would occasionally water her plants when she was not in the apartment. Because of this, Anastasia felt both flattered and grateful. Even in a foreign country, she felt a wave of warmth. That afternoon, just as Anastasia finished tidying up her apartment, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened the door, it was the blonde elderly woman. She invited Anastasia to attend the party she was hosting that day. Anastasia had never liked lively gatherings and originally wanted to refuse. But faced with the woman's repeated invitations, she eventually softened. She smiled and signed, "All right, I'll come." That evening, Anastasia brought her homemade apple pie to the party. Just as she was about to knock, the door opened on its own. A familiar face appeared before her eyes. In the instant their eyes met, both of them saw surprise reflected in each other's gaze. Lucian Weldon looked at the girl in the white dress with slightly flushed cheeks standing before him and nodded slightly in greeting. Anastasia was also a bit at a loss. After all, she had only casually decided to attend a party, yet unexpectedly ran into her attending physician here. The two exchanged no more than a few words. After Anastasia entered, she noticed that besides herself and Lucian, there was also a refined lady with delicate features, who also had an East Asian face. As soon as she arrived, the lady's eyes lit up. She immediately walked over, warmly took Anastasia's hand, and said, "Are you the new girl who just moved to town? You're so beautiful. Make yourself at home here, just treat it as your own house." The lady looked at the gentle and lovely Anastasia, growing more and more pleased, her smile nearly reaching the back of her head. Lucian, seeing his own mother chattering away, couldn't help but sigh. "Mom, don't scare the young lady." The lady suddenly realized, tapped her own head, and said cheerfully, "Oh dear, I got too excited." "Young lady, I didn't scare you, did I?" Anastasia gently shook her head. Seeing this, The lady glared at Lucian and pretended to be angry. See, the young lady doesn't think it's a big deal at all. Watching the casual banter between Lucian and his mother, Anastasia's impression of him changed a little. Lucian wasn't as cold and aloof as he appeared on the surface. In fact, he seemed humorous and witty, and sometimes even a bit sharp-tongued. She also learned from their conversation that Lucian's family had just moved from America not long ago and planned to settle in Switzerland for the long term. Later, everyone gathered around the bonfire, discussing the latest interesting happenings in town and debating which food tonight best suited their tastes. The relaxed and lively atmosphere soon put Anastasia completely at case, and for once, she truly felt a sense of home. She had been an orphan since childhood. After being adopted by the Copeland family, Edward's parents, Elliot Copeland and Wendy Copeland, always treated her politely. But after she got together with Edward, they never looked her in the eye, and harsh words became a common occurrence. In their eyes, she was just an orphan with neither power nor influence, yet she had stolen away their most beloved son. Thinking of this, Anastasia lowered her eyes to hide a trace of loneliness, picked up the glass of wine in front of her, and drank it in one go. The apple pie you made tonight was delicious. The sudden comment startled her. She turned her head and met Lucian's deep, ocean-like eyes. She smiled and nodded in thanks. After this, much of the gloom that had been lingering in her heart seemed to dissipate. Lucian, looking at the girl's smiling face, felt a faint blush creep up his usually cool features. Just moments ago, seeing her frowning in deep thought had made him inexplicably restless. He could tell that this girl seemed to be hiding many secrets, but he was not the type to pry into others' private matters. However, if she ever wanted someone to talk to, he would be more than willing to listen. The lady watched her son in this state and covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. After the party ended, she suggested that Lucian walk the young lady home. Anastasia agreed. After all, there was still some distance to her apartment, and as a woman alone, if she encountered danger, she wouldn't even be able to call for help. The two walked side by side in silence on the way back. A gentle breeze carried the faint fruity sweetness from Anastasia to his nose. Lucian's expression remained unchanged, but his heartbeat quickened. When he saw her at her door, he subconsciously reminded her, "The surgery is scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow. Be on time." Anastasia nodded solemnly and assured him that she would not be late. Chapter 15. The surgery was a great success, and the days that followed marked the beginning of a long recovery process. During this period, she and Lucian had become close friends who could talk about anything. He would remind her to take her medicine and apply ointment on time every day, accompany her in doing rehabilitation exercises, and even show up at her door to scold her after she posted food on Instagram, insisting she should watch her diet. To this, Anastasia would always reply with a cheerful smile, "Next time, I promise." Lucian could never win against her, so he would quietly throw away the plate full of spicy food and roll up his sleeves to prepare something light and nutritious. Anastasia was no fool, she could clearly see that Lucian treated her differently. But both of them tacitly chose not to break the unspoken bond between them. One reason was that Anastasia felt she was not worthy of someone as outstanding as him. The other reason was that Anastasia was afraid. For more than 10 years, she had given her heart to Edward, but he had crushed it mercilessly. All her sincerity had only brought her endless scars. She no longer wanted to fall into the trap of love, nor did she wish to believe in the illusion of romance. She thought that living alone like this was actually quite nice. Half a month later, Anastasia's hand had fully recovered. Excitedly, she found the long-forgotten violin at the bottom of her box and gently touched it. This violin was a gift from Edward back then. It was made from the finest materials, and she had always been used to playing it. So before she left, she took the violin with her. The moment the bow touched the strings, her left fingertips danced across them. The lingering, distant melody slowly flowed through the air, as if weeping, as if playing a sorrowful farewell song. The piece ended. Anastasia touched her face, only to realize it was already covered in tears. Lucian, who had been listening quietly nearby, stepped forward, applauded, and handed her a tissue. "That was wonderful, really beautiful. But your hand has just recovered, so you need to rest and avoid overexertion." Anastasia wiped away her tears and pouted. "Next, we have developed a treatment plan for your congenital aphasia, but the process might be a bit painful." As he spoke, Lucian softened his tone. "But don't be afraid, I'm the lead surgeon, and I won't let anything happen to you." His gentle yet firm voice once again soothed her restless and anxious heart. It seemed that long ago, Edward would comfort her in the same way, stroking her head and telling her not to be afraid, that he was there. But later, he was the one who personally pushed her into the abyss. Seeing the sadness in Anastasia's eyes, Lucian asked, "What's wrong?" She shook her head and signed, "It's nothing, I'm just a little tired. I want to rest." Lucian could tell she had something on her mind, but he tactfully gave her some space and left her with a few words. "If you need anything, just call me. Don't worry about bothering me, I don't mind at all." Warmth filled Anastasia's heart, and her bad mood instantly vanished. She gazed at the rainbow rising in the clear sky after the rain, feeling a surge of emotion. After all, in the days to come, no day could ever be worse than those spent by Edward's side. Chapter 16. America. A woman covered in blood appeared out of thin air on the street. The pedestrians passing by stared at this disheveled, filthy woman with looks of horror on their faces. Priscilla's eyes were wide open, bloodshot, as she screamed desperately at one of the passers-by, "Please, please call the police for me, help me, I'm begging you, save me." That person looked at her skin, festering and oozing pus, assumed she had some contagious disease, and immediately shook off her hand in disgust, backing away 3 meters. Priscilla grabbed several people in a row, but everyone avoided her as if she were the plague, some even loudly calling her crazy. In utter despair, she accidentally caught a glimpse of her own reflection in a nearby glass window, and was so frightened she froze on the spot. Her hair was dry and brittle, every inch of exposed skin was festering and oozing, her cheeks were deeply sunken and tinged with a bluish-purple hue. She looked just like a walking corpse. During this period, Edward tortured her every single day, making her life worse than death. She was repeatedly scalded with boiling water, suffered the excruciating pain of her 10 fingers being pierced, and endured every torment that Anastasia had once suffered. More than once, she wanted to just end it all by smashing her head against the wall. But he wouldn't let her die, nor would he let her truly live. Every time she was on the verge of being tortured to death, Edward would have someone save her, keeping her barely alive. A kind-hearted passerby eventually took her to the police station. Facing the police's questions, Priscilla exaggerated her story, describing her ordeal in detail. But because the evidence was destroyed in time, by the time the police arrived at the scene, it was already spotless. With insufficient evidence, and with Edward's influence in both legal and illegal circles, at most he was jailed for 15 days for intentional injury. Priscilla's act of sending Edward to jail caused a huge stir. Some netizens exposed that Priscilla was Edward's mistress and had driven away his wife Anastasia. Others even posted photos of the 3 of them at an amusement park. Major media outlets scrambled to report the story. Edward's image as a loving husband was shattered, and several partners who valued integrity cancelled their collaborations. Overnight, the Copeland Group's stock price plummeted. But Edward no longer had the energy to care about any of this. These days, he suffered from insomnia, numbing himself with alcohol, seeing Anastasia's figure every time he opened or closed his eyes. He tried to find her, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air, no news at all, as if she had never existed. Each day in prison, Edward missed her even more. For the first time, he realized that longing was like a thin thread wrapped around his throat. He couldn't swallow it, nor could he spit it out. The feeling nearly drove him mad. After being released from prison, his mental state became even more dazed. On the way home, he saw a figure up ahead that looked just like Anastasia, and immediately told the driver to stop the car. He rushed over, grabbed her arm, and couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. "Anna, is that you? I was wrong, can you forgive me, please?" But the only response he got was a hard punch from the woman's boyfriend. He was weak, his back slammed against the ground, making him grimace in pain. He squinted, looking at a face completely different from Anastasia's. The light in his eyes gradually faded away. He had mistaken someone else for her. After returning to the Copelands' residence, he stared silently at a photo of himself and Anastasia. Thomas came over as well, tugging at his sleeve and asking, "When is Mommy coming home?" Lately, it was the servants who picked him up from school. He could no longer smell the pleasant scent of his mother, taste her delicious cooking, or have anyone help him straighten his wrinkled clothes. Edward didn't know how to answer his question, and fell silent for a moment. Then he said, "Tom, Daddy will definitely find Mommy. No matter when, you have to believe in Daddy, okay?" As he said this, a place suddenly came to his mind. Chapter 17. Orphanage. The next day, before dawn, he drove to the orphanage. The director of the orphanage saw him and didn't seem surprised. Edward became even more certain of his suspicions. He strode over, his tone urgent, "Tell me where Anna is, and I can give you $4 million. The director didn't even lift his eyelids. I don't know where Anna went, but 2 months ago, she did come to see me. What did she say to you? Edward asked anxiously. She said she regretted it. She regretted being adopted by the Copeland family, and she regretted being with you. I can't give you the answer you want. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. After being thrown out, Edward's mind echoed with the words she had just said, his brain completely blank. Anastasia said, she regretted being with him. He took a deep breath, struggling to suppress his turbulent emotions, and called his assistant. Quick, check the orphanage's surveillance and transaction records from the past few months for me. He hadn't expected that this investigation would actually yield something. Every month, a large sum of money from overseas was transferred to the orphanage's account. Hearing this, Edward could barely contain his inner joy. Then the staff continued, by tracking this overseas account, we finally located it in Switzerland. Switzerland, is there a specific address? The staff shook their heads. Switzerland isn't huge, but it's not small either. Searching for someone there would still be troublesome. But after learning the general location, he immediately booked a flight to Switzerland overnight. But before leaving, there was one last thing he had to do. Edward appeared at the airport with a group of people. When he saw the woman with her face covered, only her eyes showing, he waved his hand lightly. In an inconspicuous corner, several men in suits covered her mouth and nose, dragging her away. When Priscilla woke up, the first thing she saw was Edward's calm, emotionless eyes. Scenes of past torment flashed before her eyes, making her tremble uncontrollably. She pounded on the door desperately, help, help, someone is trying to kill me. Edward sat on the sofa, swirling his wine glass, as if admiring a dying prey. Seeing no one respond to her, Priscilla broke down. She knelt before him, clutching his pant leg and pleading hoarsely, Eddie, I did all this because I loved you too much. I just wanted you to be mine alone. For the sake of me being your first love, please let me go. Her hair was disheveled, and she had long lost her former radiance, leaving only a face that still faintly resembled her old self. Edward squatted in front of her, pried her hands off his pant leg one by one. Break her arms and legs, and send her to Mexico. His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. Priscilla knew exactly what that meant. She screamed in despair, unprecedented fear filling her eyes, but in the end, her voice grew weaker and weaker. She suddenly looked up at him, a trace of sarcasm at the corner of her mouth. Do you think Anastasia left all because of me? You always blame me, but it takes two to tango, Edward. Do you really think you did nothing wrong? It was you, your favoritism, that gave me the courage to go against her. It was you who drove her away. Every word was like blood, each sentence cutting deep. He struggled to suppress the surging fury in his veins, but even so, his face turned deathly pale with every accusation she hurled. Take her away. Now. Immediately. Take her away, he roared at his assistant. The assistant didn't dare delay and ordered several bodyguards to seize her. Eager to impress Edward, the bodyguards beat and kicked Priscilla even harder. Countless fists rained down on her body. She could even hear the sound of her bones breaking. In the end, Edward found her too noisy and simply ordered them to cut out her tongue. Priscilla convulsed in pain, her vision filled with blood. Her battered body felt as if it would shatter at the slightest touch. Unable to endure the agony any longer, her vision went black and she fainted. Chapter 18. Boarding Gate. Edward was scrolling through Anastasia's Twitter media. He paused when he saw an album named, My Love. Instinctively, he clicked on it, but it required a password. After hesitating for a moment, he quickly entered 1003. The album opened, and Edward's eyes instantly reddened. Because the password she set was his birthday. Almost every photo that appeared was about him. From the small things, like the bouquet he casually bought her from a street vendor, to the big moments, like the photo of them together at her graduation ceremony. She even left a few words with every photo. She wrote, Eddie is the best brother in the world. I want to stay by his side for my whole life. She wrote, I think I might be starting to like Eddie a little, but it seems like he has someone he likes. The most recent message was from 2 months ago. She wrote, if she could have a chance to start over, she would rather not be adopted by the Copeland family, and not fall in love with Edward. Reading this, Edward's hands began to tremble. A strange sense of panic welled up in his heart. Even if he really found her, what would it change? Should he tell her that he truly loves her, or admit that everything with Priscilla was just a game? Edward's heart was suddenly filled with bitterness. But when his gaze fell on the wedding ring on his finger, that panic vanished. After all, he already knew he was wrong. Besides, Anastasia had always been unable to leave him. As long as he sincerely apologized and promised not to make the same mistake again, she would surely forgive him. The plane took off quickly, and after more than 10 hours of flying, it landed in Switzerland. However, during this time, Edward didn't dare close his eyes even once. The prolonged mental strain forced him to rely on coffee to stay awake. But he still didn't dare relax, ordering people to search all over Switzerland, yet after several months, there was still no news of her. Meanwhile, on the other side, Anastasia had just finished surgery and was already able to speak a few words. Although her recovery was slow, being able to make sounds again made her extremely excited. You need to eat light meals for a while, be careful not to get too tired, and rest early. Anastasia nodded vigorously. During this period, Lucian had never confessed his feelings to her, but he cared for her in every possible way. This troubled her greatly, even making her start to doubt. Was she just overthinking things? Lucian noticed her staring at him and touched his own face. Is there something on my face? Anastasia shook her head. Thinking of how well he had taken care of her lately, she decided to invite him to a meal. The Western restaurant by the lake just opened recently. Would you like to go try it with me? Sure, I'd be honored. Anastasia waited for him in the lounge until he finished work. During that time, another nurse winked at her. Waiting for your boyfriend to get off work? Anastasia quickly waved her hands, her face unconsciously growing warm. Seeing this, the nurse covered her mouth and giggled, pulling another nurse over and saying, "Looks like Dr. Weldon hasn't won her over yet." Her words left Anastasia a bit confused, but what followed only confirmed her suspicions. So much so that, when they walked side by side later, she deliberately kept some distance from him. Lucian noticed her unusual behavior, but said nothing, still standing by her side. The two of them walked silently along the lakeside. Summer had arrived, and today was a rare day of beautiful weather. Sunlight reflected off the lake, a gentle breeze stirred the sparkling waves, making the scene truly beautiful. For a moment, Anastasia was mesmerized, and didn't notice the child riding a bicycle toward her. Just as the bicycle was about to hit her, Lucian instinctively grabbed her hand, accidentally pulling her into his arms. In the next instant, Anastasia's cheek was pressed against his chest, and she could almost hear the thunderous beating of his heart. At the same time, smelling the faint, cool scent of cedar on him, her own heart raced even faster. She blinked, looking at his hand resting on her waist, her cheeks instantly turning bright red. "Anna, are you all right?" His clear voice came from above her head. She immediately stepped out of his embrace, waved her hand, and avoided his gaze to show she was fine. Lucian wanted to say something more, but when he saw a strange man ahead watching them with a cold expression, he frowned. Chapter 19. Edward had imagined countless scenarios of how Anastasia would react when he saw her again. She might look at him with a blank face and tell him to get lost, or perhaps she wouldn't even want to see him at all. But no matter what he had imagined, none of them involved her being held by another man. Thinking of this, the corners of his eyes reddened. He took a few steps forward, wanting to grab her hand. But Lucian blocked her completely, leaving no gap. "Do you know this man?" Anastasia lifted her eyes to look at him, but when she met his almost feverish gaze, she gently shook her head. She never expected that Edward would be able to find her. Even more unexpected was that, after nearly half a year apart, he had become like this. A thin jaw covered with an unshaven beard, bloodshot eyes, and a body that looked as if it could collapse at any moment. Everything about him showed just how hard Edward's life had been during this time. But no matter what, her heart no longer stirred for him. If she owed him anything, it was probably only the years of upbringing she had received from the Copeland family. The cold indifference in her eyes was like a sharp blade, stripping Edward's heart piece by piece. How could she say she didn't know him? He was clearly the person she loved most. Edward's eyes were red, and his heart ached so much that even his breathing became heavier. He strained his voice, only to realize how hoarse it sounded. "Anna, I know I was wrong. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have treated you that way." But Anastasia didn't even lift her eyelids, and walked quickly away with that unfamiliar man. Edward hurried after her, trying to grab her hand, but Lucian blocked him firmly. His usually cool voice now carried a hint of anger. "Didn't you hear what she said? She doesn't know you. I'm her husband. How could she not know me? And who are you to question me here?" Edward shouted at him, his voice hoarse and desperate. God knows how furious he was when he saw Anastasia in another man's arms. So when he was questioned, the burning fire of jealousy completely consumed him. He shouted angrily at Anastasia's retreating figure, his voice tinged with unwillingness. "Anna, I really know I was wrong. I've already taught Priscilla a lesson, she will never appear in front of you again. Please forgive me, won't you? Seeing her pause for a moment, Edward's eyes lit up and he continued. Tom misses you. He wanted to come with me, but he gets airsick. He repeatedly told me to make sure I bring his mom back. At first, I was with you because Priscilla rejected me, but later I realized that I had already fallen deeply in love with you. Lucian also learned about the relationship between the two from his words. But he still didn't move an inch, continuing to watch him coldly. He had asked Anastasia about her past a long time ago, but she had never told him anything. But he had seen her medical reports, so he knew her past had not been easy. Anastasia turned back, her gaze falling on him again, her voice hoarse. Brother, I'm glad you came to see me. Hearing her speak for the first time, Edward was a little surprised, his eyes widening slightly. But the word, brother, from her lips made his heart clench. Ever since they had been together, she had never called him brother again. Now, was she trying to cut ties with him? Edward didn't dare meet her eyes, but Anastasia kept looking at him quietly. But there is no possibility for us anymore. Everything you're doing is in vain. Even if you force broken glass back together, there will always be cracks. It's the same for us. Even if you apologize and repent now, the hurt you caused me has already been carved into my heart and can never be healed. Saying this, she let out a long breath, as if relieved. So, brother, let's part on good terms. Find Tom a better stepmother. After saying this, Anastasia didn't look at him again and left with Edward. Naturally, she didn't notice Edward's deathly pale face or the words he couldn't bring himself to say. Edward watched their backs as they walked side by side, his heart completely engulfed by regret. If only he had realized this sooner. If only he had kept his distance from Priscilla. Would everything have been different? Edward buried his hands in his hair, screaming with all his might as tears streamed uncontrollably down his face. As he collapsed to the ground, he whispered softly. Unfortunately, there is no if. Chapter 20. In the days that followed, Edward always found new ways to appear before her. Every day, a bouquet of flowers was delivered to her doorstep right on time. Apology messages came from different numbers, and he even stood outside her building just to catch a glimpse of her. But Anastasia never paid any attention to him. The flowers he sent always ended up in the trash, and she blocked one unfamiliar number after another. Until that day, when Edward collapsed from heatstroke at her doorstep under the scorching sun. Yet Anastasia still didn't care, she simply called the community staff to take him to the hospital. Without even seeing him once. When Edward woke up in the hospital and saw his assistant sitting beside him, he was completely stunned. In the past, whenever she heard he was hurt, she would worry herself sick, staying by his side day and night until he recovered. But now, she hadn't even looked at him once. Thinking of this, Edward clutched his chest, letting the uncontrollable pain sweep through his body, penetrating deep into his bones. His assistant looked at the state of his boss and sighed. He tried to persuade him, saying, Mr. Copeland, don't wear yourself out like this. After all, Mr. Thomas is still waiting for you back in America. Suddenly, Edward looked up sharply, his eyes shining with unprecedented brightness. Quick, bring Thomas here. Since she refused to see him, he didn't believe she would refuse to see her own son. The moment Thomas arrived in Switzerland, he knocked on Anastasia's door. But it was Lucian who opened the door. Looking at the little boy who barely reached his knee, Lucian quickly realized who he was. He glanced behind him, and after confirming that the other man hadn't followed, he turned to ask Anastasia, should we let this little guy in? When Anastasia saw who it was, her expression grew complicated, but she nodded. As soon as he entered, Thomas jumped into Anastasia's arms, hugging her neck and crying. Mommy, when will you come home with Daddy? I was dizzy from the long flight, but I came all the way here because I missed you. I really, really missed you. The sudden affection left her momentarily stunned. In her memory, Thomas had never been close to her. As he grew older, he wouldn't even let her hug him. Let alone cling to her neck and act spoiled like this. She also knew clearly that Edward had sent him to call her back. But she was not someone who could be swayed by a child. So even though he came, her heart remained completely unmoved. Tom, go back. Daddy will raise you well and find you a good stepmother. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Thomas flew into a rage. He jumped out of her arms, pointed at Lucian, and shouted hoarsely, Mommy, are you leaving me and Daddy because of this man? Priscilla has already been sent to Mexico, she'll never appear before you again. Can't you forgive Daddy just once? Anastasia said nothing, simply carried him to the door, closed it, and called Edward. Stop wasting your effort. Your presence has already had a huge impact on my life. If you truly care about me, then let this be the end. Let this be the end? How could he let it end here? He loved her desperately, and he had only made a mistake that every man might make. Now he had already bowed his head to her. What more did she want? Edward, heartbroken, took Thomas back. For the next few days, he didn't appear before her, but he always watched her from a distance. And so he saw her wiping sweat from another man's brow, smiling at another man, acting intimately. All of it drove him mad with jealousy. Only now did he finally understand how much pain she must have felt when she learned he was with Priscilla. Just watching her was enough to drown his heart in a flood of bitterness. And what about her, watching him be intimate with Priscilla again and again? Was her heart aching so much she could barely breathe? Meanwhile, Anastasia's relationship with Lucian grew closer, but he still hadn't confessed his feelings to her. Instead, he paid even more attention to her affairs. For example, he secretly arranged security personnel near her apartment to prevent Edward from disturbing her again and again. Chapter 21. Everything deeply moved Anastasia, and at the same time, the heart that Edward had locked away began to open up for him, little by little. Edward, who saw all of this, felt a growing sense of crisis in his heart. He decided he could no longer sit and wait for fate. Even if he had to tie her up, he would bring her back to their country. Feelings could be rekindled, but if her heart truly changed, then there would be nothing he could do. That night, he waited not far from the research institute, keeping a close watch on the entrance. A few minutes later, as expected, Anastasia came out together with Lucian. Just as he was about to order his bodyguard to knock Lucian out, he suddenly noticed a man in black not far ahead, lurking and watching their position. Edward clearly saw the knife in the man's hand. Alarmed, he quickly pushed open the car door and ran toward Anastasia. Sensing something was wrong, the man in black rushed forward and stabbed fiercely at Lucian's abdomen. But Anastasia instinctively pushed Lucian away, and just as she was about to be struck by the knife, Edward lunged forward and grabbed the blade tightly. Blood dripped from his palm onto the ground, but Edward seemed oblivious to the pain, staring at Anastasia with eyes full of despair. He hadn't expected that she would risk her own life for that man. It seemed she cared about that man far more than he had imagined. Once, her eyes had been filled only with him, but now, even after he shielded her from a knife, she didn't spare him a single glance. The sharp pain pierced deep into his bones, but the pain in his hand was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. The bodyguard in the car saw what happened and immediately got out to subdue the man in black, who was trying to escape. Anastasia saw all of this, said nothing, and simply asked the medical staff at the institute to treat his wound. "Thank you for taking that knife for me, but I still hope you won't interfere too much in my life." One rejection after another made it impossible for Edward to hide his pain any longer. Looking at her, protected behind that man, his eyes reddened. "No, please, I don't agree to the divorce. Don't be with someone else. My personal information has already been changed, and the divorce certificate is invalid. Even if you don't agree, there's nothing you can do, Edward. Please let me go." With that, she didn't look at him again and left with Lucian. On the way back, Anastasia sighed. She had originally gone abroad to leave Edward behind for good, but now he had repeatedly turned her life upside down. She was even considering whether she should just move to another country altogether. Lucian noticed her conflicted emotions and asked, "What's wrong? Are you hurt somewhere?" Anastasia simply told him what she was thinking. Unexpectedly, Lucian stopped in his tracks. He looked at her, his usually calm face showing a hint of panic. "Which country do you want to 22? The moment she had unhesitatingly shielded him just now, his heart had been thrown into chaos. The passionate, uncontrollable feelings he had long suppressed now surged forth completely. "I don't know yet. Maybe after I fully recover, I'll travel the world." Her casual tone made his heart ache again, and he could no longer suppress the love that surged within him. He didn't dare meet her gaze, but his voice was firm and gentle. "Anna, would you be my girlfriend? I don't care about your past. The person I like is you. Before, I always felt I wasn't good enough, so I never confessed to you. But now, I know if I don't say it, it'll be too late. I wonder if you'd be willing to be with me." The setting sun filtered through the leaves, casting scattered golden light across his face. Anastasia looked at him steadily, her heart slightly stirred. She knew, of course, that he meant every word. After spending this time together, she already understood his character very well. On the surface, he seemed cold and distant, always keeping people at arm's length, but deep down, he was gentler and more attentive than anyone. especially when it came to her. But she still let out a long sigh. You know, I've been divorced, and I once had a child. She couldn't deny that she had feelings for him too, but she couldn't give herself to him completely. At least, not now. Chapter 22. After she rejected Lucian, she once again concealed her identity and traveled around the world. Over the past year, in every country she landed, she would always catch a glimpse of Lucian's figure. When she arrived in the UK, he sent her more than 200 red roses. When she landed in the Netherlands, he sent her a hillside full of red tulips. When she arrived in Russia, he even sent her countless daisies. Anastasia buried his love deep in her heart, but she never dared to take that step forward. Until one day, while she was walking on the streets of Australia, someone suddenly tried to rob her and even laid hands on her. It was at that moment that Lucian appeared. He quickly drove those people away, held the trembling Anastasia in his arms, and gently comforted her, saying, "Anna, don't be afraid, I've always been here." Yes, after traveling through several countries, he had always been silently guarding her side. Anastasia cried in his arms for a long time before she finally raised her tear-streaked face and choked out, "I wonder if it's too late if I agree now?" Lucian wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes, curled his lips into a smile, and teased, "It's too late. My mom said if you don't agree soon, she's going to break my legs." Anastasia instantly broke into a smile through her tears. After that, the two of them returned to Switzerland, got married in a flash, and officially began living together. Their days together were sweet, and Anastasia felt happy every single day. With Lucian's support, she even signed up for the international violin competition and won the championship in one go. And she finally fulfilled the dream she had had since childhood. It wasn't until half a year later that she heard news about Edward again. It was said that after he was hospitalized for taking a knife for Anastasia, he was diagnosed with cancer. His health declined day by day, and now he was living with the help of a ventilator. Even so, he still refused to leave Switzerland. Elliot and Wendy, who were far away abroad, rushed him back home overnight when they heard the news, and brought Thomas to stay by their side and take care of him. When his life was hanging by a thread, he still couldn't let go. Elliot called Anastasia, begging her to return home no matter what to see him one last time. Anastasia agreed. When she saw the emaciated Edward lying in the hospital bed, she was a little dazed. At 16, he had driven away those who called her mute, protecting her without hesitation. At 18, he was full of youthful spirit and told her that he liked her. At 21, he knelt before her and promised to spend a lifetime together, growing old side by side. Anastasia felt a little sad, but soon, the baby in her belly kicked her, making her cry out in pain instinctively. Ouch! Seeing this, Lucian immediately knew it was the baby acting up again, and quickly told her to leave the room and not stay in the ward. Anastasia touched her swollen belly and stuck out her tongue at him, saying, "All right, honey, let's go out together." However, what they didn't know was that at the moment the door closed, a single tear fell from the corner of Edward's eye. Suddenly, the alarm sounded in the hospital room. The heart monitor that had been placed beside him quickly turned into a straight line. But all of this no longer had anything to do with Anastasia. For the rest of her life, she would spend her days with Lucian and the baby in her belly. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.